Hi, Bhaswati. How you doing?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm in New York. You're in India. This
I
is
am in Benares, the most ancient city of Asia.
that is amazing. Yeah. So today I know we're going to talk about the Ayurvedic approach to immunity and immune health. But before we kind of get into that, maybe you can talk and give a brief overview about what is Ayurveda and what is the philosophy behind this very ancient medicine.
Yeah, so Ayurveda is the or the oldest continuously practiced form of medicine on the planet. It has been handed down uninterrupted, generation to generation to generation, from my grandmother's grandmother from 10,000 years ago, through the mostly the female side of the family, because they're the ones that didn't go to war, and they kept the whole family healthy and happy through the remedies in their kitchen and in their forests, but also through the men who became professional surgeons and medical, doctor kind of physician kind of people. And so that system of medicine has a few tenets that a lot of people in the West don't understand. One is that it says that we are biological creatures in nature. And if we align ourselves with the rhythms of nature, the day night rhythm, the lunar rhythm, and then the annual solar rhythm, then we are going to have more awareness of how our body has subtle changes in it and align with nature. And nature always resurrects itself, even with the stuff that's been going on in the last like 2 years and in the last 10 years. Nature always finds a way to have spring bloom again, and to have, the heat in the summer and the cold in the winter. Even if the rains are off, even if other things are off, it aligns. So Ayurveda says align yourself with nature and you'll align. The second is it really believes in the power of subtle energy. So there's this Sanskrit sloka that says, Yatha pinde tatha brahmande. As in a small little ball, a pinde, so in the entire galaxy, which is the macrocosm. So if the microcosm has certain laws and macrocosm follows those laws, and we're somewhere in between there, then if we follow those laws of gravity, of chemistry, of physics, of biology, we are going to be aligned. And we can use those analogies of what happens on the macro scale to what happens on our micro scale inside our bodies. And the another tenet, I mean, there's many tenets, but the third tenet I want to mention is that if we need to realign ourselves, we can use items from nature because they have a certain frequency in the way that they interact with their ecosystem. And we take those into our body and we can align ourselves with that strength or that peace or that uh, fire, whichever thing we're needing in our body. And so Ayurveda is a system that's going to allow people to use it in so many flexible ways, right? And yet there's a systematic method. It is called a pseudoscience because the people on Wikipedia have locked the entry thinking that they know better. And modern medicine then goes to Wikipedia for information and say, oh, it's written as a pseudoscience. But it is so scientific to logically observe things and then test out your theories. Okay, how does this work? And this has been happening, as I said, uninterrupted by the medicine men for 10,000 years. And so
Yeah,
if it
there's
didn't work,
something to it, right?
yeah, exactly my point. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like some in a lot of ways we've become very disconnected. So, how do you know how do you know about your own frequency and what's happening? Like, how do you measure that?
So,
And how do you then help realign yourself?
yeah, so in an earlier episode, we talked about Vata, Pitta, Kapha and the doshas. And these doshas are aligned with the elements that we see that have forces in them. So we talk about the ether, the air, the fire, the water, and the earth. And these five elements combine into three themes. One is a theme of movement, which is typified by things that move fast, like ether and air. One is a theme of transformation, which is typified by fire, burning things and making solids into gas, or water, which takes things and either swells them up or helps them, to melt, basically. So fire and water is a theme of transformation. And then water, used twice because there's so much of it on Earth. Water and earth are the typifying elements for the theme of stability and lubrication. So these movement, transformation, and stability are these three themes that we have in our bodies. And it actually boils everything down, not to specific biochemical pathways, although those are there underlying them, but it says just follow the tendencies. And then there's sophisticated levels of understanding the Vata, which is the movement of the body, the Pitta, which is the transformational quality or the fire or the water transformation, and then the Kapha, which grounds us, lubricates, stabilizes. And so we have personalities based on Vata, Pitta, Kapha. We have foods based on Vata, Pitta, Kapha. We have environments that are based on Vata, Pitta, Kapha. And this, if it didn't work, this triad, they would have said, nah, this doesn't hold true. But there are so many things you can see around the world where you can say, oh, that's so Vata. So a person that is usually grounded, who's suddenly airheaded, and like, oh, I don't know what I want to eat. I don't know where I'm going to go. I can't find my keys. I can't do this. If you notice that you have moved from a place where you were very grounded to where you've become all unstable, that means that the movement quality has increased and the stability quality has decreased. And so what Ayurveda says is add less or add more stabilizing quality, add more kapha into your life, in your food, in your routines, in your herbs that you drink, in your environment around you, and decrease the vata. In addition to that, there are times of day. So the greatest movement in the day is when the trees move from no photosynthesizing to when the sun comes up and they all turn towards the sun and start photosynthesizing. And that massive movement is called sunrise, when the sun comes out and the trees and the plants like, yummy sun. And then at the end of the day, which is the joint between day and night, which is called sunset, the trees move and say, okay, I've been photosynthesizing, now it's time for me to move. So that time where there's that movement of the machinery of the plants and trees is the Vata time of day. So we call that 4 to 7 a.m. and 4 to 7 p.m. in most parts of the world. Obviously, Arctic Circle is different, but most parts of the world. The hottest time of the day is the Pitta time of the day, because that's when the fire is highest. So they say when the fire is high in the sky, the fire is high in the belly. So you should have your biggest meal in that Pitta time of day. Kapha is the time of rest. And so it's, you could say 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. It's after the change of Vata has happened and things are kind of resting now in the inertia of what they're doing. So once the trees start photosynthesizing, they just photosynthesize. So they just do that from 7 to 10 a.m. And so these themes through the day, these themes through foods, these themes through the environment, all join this idea of Vata, Pitta, Kapha theory. It's called Doshas, right? What's your dosha, baby? So your doshas. And we follow Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and we can actually understand the physiology of the body. We can understand brush strokes of what's going on biochemically, but really not through chemistry molecules, but through the ways that things work. They have different terms for them in Sanskrit, but they understand the patterns so well that you can apply them to something like the immune system so easily and so quickly, when you don't need like a prescription and you don't need a bunch of lab tests, right, to figure out what medicine to give. It's really extraordinary how quickly it can work because it just follows these general themes.
How do you, I guess, diagnose somebody and their dosha, right? How do you tell? Is it literally by when you see a patient, are you talking with them and kind of asking them questions about their personality, the foods that they eat, that sort of thing? Or is it, are you literally checking pulse? Are you touching them?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So the There are two ways. If you're by yourself, you can actually take a quiz. And in today's world, you can just go on the internet and put in dosha quiz, and there'll be like 20 quizzes out there. You can take a short quiz, you can take a long quiz. When I do this kind of analysis with my students, I guide them to take a quiz that's a little bit longer, but how to look at the questions. And the gold standard way is to go to an Ayurvedic physician who's seen a lot of patients. And for those of us who take nadi pariksha, so we put our fingers on the pulse, so it'll look like this. I have my fingers on the pulse, and from this side it'll look okay, like this. And there's actually a different pulse that's going on under each finger simultaneously. And we can read that as the Vata, the Pitta, and the Kapha pulse. And if you place it on someone else's hand, this is not the way I'd read mine. I'd go like this, just because twisting your arm. But to show you, when you do this, I can read not only the Vata, Pitta, Kapha down deep, which is their constitution, but what's going on for them right then. So if they have a very high fluttery pulse, and that's a lot of Vata, I'll look at the time and I'll say, oh, it's close to noon. Are you hungry? And like, yeah, how did you know? I said, because your Vata is very high. You're very unsettled, right? Or and there's actually organs that correlate to the three fingers, three on the left arm and three on the right arm. So I can take their kidney pulse and say, okay, you've got a lot of Vata in there. Do you need to get up and take a bathroom break? And I'm like, yeah, how did you know? It's in your pulse. So I actually use the pulse to diagnose not only their dosha of their baseline, what they are in terms of their constitution, but also their doshas of what's going on in their body right now, whether it's a transitional thing about the routine of the day, like food or bathroom, but also the disease levels. So that's the gold standard, but not everyone has access to the gold standard. And so these quizzes are a way of approximating that by asking you questions, because there are tendencies in the physical body that actually reflect what's going on in the mind. An example would be people that are balded or have very, very quickly graying hair. They have a lot of transformation. It's like the heat of transformation burns out their hair. And so that's a signal that they're very Pitta. Their natural hair color, obviously. If they have very light hair and very thin hair, and they have, almost their scalp showing, that's very light. So which one would that be? That's Vata. And Kaphas, which are the grounded, stable, they have thick hair like you, nice, thick, like lot of good quality hair that doesn't break, but also like they can grow it long. It doesn't break off. And so the questions in the quizzes will ask about your nails, your hair, your jaw shape, your tendencies of your weight and your length of your bones. And it will ask you about things that you do. So if you tend to move around a lot, you have a lot of Vata. If you tend to love sitting in one place, like a librarian, you're more of a Kapha. If you love to change things and transform whatever your field is, you're more of a Pitta. If you're super creative and you like to create things from scratch, like you have an idea and you want to make a book or a film or a painting out of it, artists, they are creators. And that is taking from the ether and manifesting. So that's more Vata. There's a lot of movement.
I'm so Vata.
You are a Vata, but you're also, a very creative person. So being Vata is not bad. Being Pitta is not bad. Being Kapha is not bad. What's bad? I mean, there's no good and bad in Sanskrit. There's only balanced and imbalanced. And that's a really hard concept for Westerners, because the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, have this good-bad concept, whereas the Sanskritic religions or the Indian religions all talk about harmony and disharmony. And if you're out of harmony with what you need to be, like if I right now try to become a filmmaker, it won't work for me. That's not because filmmaking is good or bad. It's because it's aligned with certain people. So it's alignment, that harmony, that makes it good, right? So My mom always tells me to avoid the words good and bad because, she's like, they're Christian words. Don't get trapped into that, because then you'll go into the whole guilt and shame and regret and all that. Just work on harmony. If something didn't work again toward harmony. And if that didn't work, say, okay, that was disharmonious, work toward harmony. And it's actually a much more forgiving and loving system, because the goal is always harmony with your environment,
Yeah,
and
I
harmony
like
with the
that.
doshas. Yeah. So if you're a Vata, my goal is not going to be to obliterate your Vata. It's going to be to take the Vata that's imbalanced, that's like this, and bring it back into the balance. And when people can't understand it, I talk to them about, look at the clouds, when they're floating and they're full and they're just moving slowly across the sky. It's very balanced, it's very peaceful. But when they're like, they're like storm clouds, it's very disconcerting for people. Or look at a river. When the river is flowing, it's always moving. But when it's moving with a very chaotic motion, and there's waves coming up onto the river banks, and there's obstructions in the river, and the river's not flowing smoothly, it can create a lot of damage. But when the river is flowing at its pace and just flowing, that is balance. So I try to bring people back to that balanced river if they're a Vata. If they're a Kapha, their river tends to be a little bit less quick flowing because they don't have as much, movement in their natural constitution. They have more of a grounded state, but they still do have some movement of the river. So I try to bring them back to that pace.
Wow, that's so fascinating. So if someone has a weak immune system, um, what does that mean, actually?
Well,
I
it
mean, how
means
do
that
you
they're out of balance. It's that harmony and disharmony. It only means they're out of balance. So it could be a Vata person that's out of balance with their Vata. It could be a Pitta person that has their fire, which dominates their personality and their life. They are either not manifesting the fire they should be, or they got too much fire, which is actually more common in the Western world. And they're blowing out their fire. Like, think of a forest fire versus a nice, gentle campfire that warms you but doesn't like burn your skin. And the kapha, which is the lubrication and stability, is actually the house of the immune system. So kapha people who are balanced kapha. So what does that mean? That means you have a certain amount of water, earth, grounding. And in physiologic terms, what it comes to is you have a little bit more oil in your body, because oil is most grounding. So you have an oily tendency, maybe you have oily skin, your skin doesn't go dry, you have nice moist skin, and maybe you have a little extra fat on your body. A little extra is actually normal for kapha. They have bigger bones, they have more stable bodies, and that extra oil houses the immune system. We're now not knowing in modern medicine. We now know in modern medicine that the lymphatic system and these globs of tissue around our, what we call our lymph glands, they have a lot of oil in them. And that oil allows the immune cells to not just move in the blood vessels, which are mostly water-based, because blood is, based of this liquid of water, but they move between the cell walls, which are all lipids, all fats. So for 50 years, when Americans were learning that fat is bad, so they were eating no fat, low fat, no fat, don't eat fat, have carbs, don't eat fat. Many of them now, years later, have such low fat in their body that they developed all the things that happens when you don't have good cells that are lined with fat. So the cells that are most important to be lined with fat are the ones that conduct electricity, which are our nerves. So they get heart problems and they get nerve problems. So Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease, which are really high in westernized, urbanized people, virtually don't happen in people who have the traditional diets and the traditional cultures where they eat fats that are non-refined and that are like the natural fats, or the well understood fats, right? So kaphas have to watch how much fat they have in their body, how it's balanced, and not to build up within that fat junky fat. So you've got the good fat, which is brown fat, and then you've got a certain amount of white fat, but then you've got this junky fat, which is really like the oils that we eat that are not good for you. And because we have an entire 2 generations, really 50 years of people eating the refined oil and things that are artificially made, we see the diseases from it, and we see that their immune system's been affected. Meanwhile, you go to the people who are poor and couldn't afford those fancy foods. So they ate at home. They had rice and beans. They had vegetables from their garden. They had simpler foods. They just ate fruits and vegetables. And they didn't, have these complex pizzas that are these dough crusts that have been frozen and then preservatives added and all this, non-food stuff in their food.
Processed foods and right.
Yeah, exactly. So the term we use now is processed foods. Processing is part of man's natural desire to take foods and make them available at other times. But there are processing methods which are aligned with the human physiology, and there are processing methods that are not aligned. And actually, in the classes I teach, I invited a food chemist, fantastic professor. He's worked both in academia as well as in industry. And he was telling us how refined oils are made. And I will tell you, I haven't had refined oils in my kitchen for, a long time, decades. But I stopped eating at certain restaurants because they use refined oil, because I don't want that in my system. Once every, month or so is okay. But especially with the pandemic, I've been cooking at home. I cook with unrefined, pure oils.
What do you consider an unrefined
Unrefined.
oil?
So the
Or refined?
Yeah. So first, the unrefined oils, which are the great oils, are ghee, which is properly made ghee of cow milk only, made into yogurt, and the yogurt bacteria eat out most of the stuff that we call, lactose, like what lactose intolerant people can't take, and the proteins. They transform that into yogurt, and then that is churned. The butter is taken out, and then that butter is heated, and that clarified butter, which has that golden yellow color, that's ghee. If you have any other kind of thing, you just take butter and the butter was not made from yogurt, which is called cultured butter, then you're not making ghee. You're making something else. So the tests that were done that show that ghee is bad for you were made from the butter that is not cultured. So ghee is one. Olive oil is the Western equivalent, it's the Mediterranean equivalent of a good oil, but it has to be cold pressed and not olive oil tasting, which is artificial olive oil components added to refined oil. You have to be careful that you get cold pressed virgin olive oil. And it smells different. You can tell that that's olive oil. A third is almost non-existent out in the world today. It's palm oil that is unrefined, because most palm oil is genetically modified and it's refined. So I'm going to basically take palm oil off the list unless you actually grow palm in West Africa. Okay, so Ayurveda doesn't talk about olive oil or palm oil. It talks about ghee. So the other 3 that they use are unrefined mustard oil, unrefined coconut oil, and unrefined sesame oil, which is called til. So til is Til. It's from the Fertile Crescent. It's the king of oils. It is probably the best for the human body on the outside when you put it on your skin. And it's a fantastic oil. And it's not good internally because it scrapes out channels. So it undoes the work of your physiology. So you don't want to have too much of it in your diet, but a little bit of it is okay. These 4, the ghee, the mustard oil, the coconut oil, and the sesame oil, basically make up 99% of the oils that we use in Ayurveda, both for medicines and for foods. Okay, so what's refined oil? That's the second part of your question. Refined is anything where they've taken anything that has oil, usually it's a seed, and they've pressed it, but instead of cold pressing it between wood and stone, they're using metal, which has an inherent heat capacity in it, and it heats up the oil. So you get not only changes in cis fats and trans fats, you've heard of this because they've made trans fats illegal in many places, but you also get this oil that is metastable. It's not super stable to be heated. And today people are not cooking on wood stoves that only go up to like 200 degrees. They're cooking on these induction stoves. They're cooking on gas flames, electric stoves that go up to 800 degrees, 600 degrees. And those oils are not stable at those temperatures. In addition, there are refining, what should we say, processed methods, as you said, which are basically there to just quickly get oil and sell it. And those people make a lot of money for the oils that they make. And so this food chemist that we had brought in was a consultant to them. He went there, you know, having read the books, he went there on this assignment. He said, Bhaswati, I was so disgusted by what I saw that I stopped eating refined oils and got rid of it from our home. I said, what did you see? The machinery, it gets sticky, right? Like oil does. And it's very hard to clean. They have to use detergents to clean it. So there's residues of that. They use a sand to get rid of the color and the smell, because the smell of rancid oil is so awful. And Americans want clean oil. They want oil that doesn't feel like oil, because they want to pretend that they're not having oil. And then they use nickel to pull out more of that, the chemicals, which basically are giving you the extra color and that smell. And so you've got remnants of this one sand derivative, and you've got remnants of nickel, and you've got some detergent in your refined oil that's put into a pretty plastic bottle with a nice label. We have
That
found,
should be illegal to sell.
actually, it would be illegal if politicians didn't make so much money from the bribes that they get from the people who make oil that pay off the politicians. That's really the reality. And that's true in every country. And it is such a huge source of profit that every food company resorts to it, because it allows them to make higher quality other products. And there are a couple of other
So you're talking about, are you talking about vegetable oils and canola oils and that sort of thing?
That's exactly right. So corn oil, which is genetically modified, canola oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, refined peanut oil, refined mustard oil. Mustard oil is illegal in America because when they refine it, which is what gets in, it actually produces this thing called erucic acid, which is a poison for the body. But if you use unrefined oil, which is still available in the Indian stores in the USA, you can actually take it. It's for topical use only. It's very good for massaging on your skin. It heats it up and it gets rid of excess fat. That's like not excess fat. And that is still available in America. And that mustard oil, if it's unrefined, is great. But anything that's become refined to make it less smelly or to make it less interfering in the cuisine, right? Because they're like, oh, use a light oil that doesn't affect the taste. The oil is supposed to affect the taste, right? So people, instead of using butter, they'll use canola oil in their cake recipes. You've just turned the cake to poison because you're using that oil.
Wow.
But it's a slow poison. Don't worry. It's not like it's going to kill you right away. First, you'll get heart disease or cancer, and then it'll, people be like, I wonder why I got sick. I'm so healthy. I exercise. I go to the gym. I don't eat any bad foods. I hear all these old ladies tell me, I don't eat any bad foods. I'm like, what does that mean? I don't eat a lot of oil. I don't eat a lot of snacks. You should be making ghee-laden cookies and eating them, once a month, because that's going to replenish the good oils in your body, in your kapha, right? Your stability, your lubrication, because that's where your immune system resides, in those little pockets of your oily tissues. And then your immune system, modern medicine hasn't figured this out yet, but the immune system, a little bit is moving through the blood because the blood can be, full of poisons or bacteria or things we don't want, pathogens. But a lot of the immune system is moving through microchannels, which are not only the lymphatic system, but between the cells, the cell wall to cell wall, because it's just a highway of fat cells. So modern medicine has just discovered this, because they used to make fun of Ayurveda, saying, why do you use oils on the skin? Why is oil massage such a big part of it? This is ridiculous. And Indian people who know Ayurveda would say, well, medicine goes through the skin. And they would say, no, it doesn't. Well, transdermal medicines go through the skin, right? That's why we put nitroglycerin like on the skin under the heart when someone has angina, or we use painkillers, or we use contraceptives. There's so many medicines that go through the skin. Well, if you put oil on the skin and you embed some herbs into that oil, that also goes into the skin, and it goes right down into that highway of fat tissues and travels through the body. And so the understanding of the fat layer and how to utilize it for the immune function is a specialty of Ayurveda. And we see it when they cleanse, they go in, they can get into places where toxins are housed, like if you have fibromyalgia or autoimmune diseases where the antibodies kind of hide in little pockets. You can't get in through the blood because they're hiding. You get in through the fat layer and you capture them and you bring them out. That process is called panchakarma. And we can use these kind of methods of Ayurveda to help people with diseases. I'm not going to use the 4-letter word cure because that's bad to use that, but basically help people alleviate themselves of diseases that are impossible to treat using modern medicine. In fact, that's how I got into it, because I was so fascinated how the Ayurvedic treatment protocol was showing me, from day 0 to 6 weeks later, something that I'd never seen in my excellent trainings in the USA in modern medicine. And I said, well, wait a second. If these are excellent trainings, but they're not healing, and these are primitive trainings and they're healing, and they're resurrecting the immune system, they're getting rid of these autoimmune diseases, right? The immune system is responsible not only for infections and autoimmune diseases and immunodeficiency, but also for cancer, and also for these cold, cough, flu, pandemic kind of infections. And all of this is immune system. And frankly, modern medicine is very, very infantile in its approach because it just doesn't understand the kapha.
Well, it's also very young comparatively, right? So, um, so kind of as we kind of wrap this up, so what are some of the key things that you think people should keep in mind if they want to use an Ayurvedic approach towards their own health and preventing disease, preventing illness, preventing, getting COVID or whatever it may be? How do we boost our immune system so we're as balanced or as strong as possible?
So we
Are
should
there
do
some
another
key things
episode
that we
on
should all
this.
kind of keep in
Yeah,
mind?
we should do an episode on the practical aspects of this, because I've been doing this for 2 years, not only with my patients all over the world via video consultation, which is, I keep wanting to start in-person consultation, but then there's another wave. So I'm basically, for protecting my patients and not being a carrier, taking from one and giving to another, I'm basically working online with my patients, and they're all over the world, and they are facing these challenges. And practical things are individualized in Ayurveda. So one person that has COVID is not like another person that has COVID. And right now the approach is give everyone the same thing. Ayurveda says, look at your symptoms, look at which symptoms are going on for you and how you feel. Is it affecting your mind? Do you have like a mind that's very unsettled, which a lot of people do? There's a lot of mental health issues going on. Do you notice that your fire has changed? A lot of people that have had COVID are noticing that they have acidity that they cannot control, acid reflux, right? Or GERD, as it's called, gastroesophageal reflux disease. Or they're having a lot of decay in their muscle mass, so they're feeling weakness chronically. There is a syndrome of women having menstrual irregularities. There is a syndrome of people having heart problems and having just unpredictable heart issues, or very fluctuating blood pressure suddenly after they've had COVID. There's a whole group of people that are talking about how their thighs feel very weak, like they used to be able to squat and get up, and now they can't get up again. Their thighs don't have that strength. And so there's a whole series of symptoms in syndromes that are happening. So every person needs to be treated differently. So I can't just say, oh, okay, you had COVID, this is what you do. But to build the immune system, you have to see where you're at and then what's weak and make that stronger. So if you have a tendency for respiratory issues, and every year in December or January you used to get the flu, well, this year, it's January, so you need to think about how to strengthen your lungs. So Ayurveda has many, many herbs that can be taken in different ways to strengthen the lungs. So Tulsi is one of them, which is called holy basil in English. Vasa is one of them. It's uh, Adhatoda vasica is the botanical name. There is bibitaki, which is a fruit of a tree that's very good for the kapha in the lungs to prevent that phlegm from building up too much. There is a whole
Do you have
series.
these as teas? Do you
Yeah,
drink
so
these as
then so
teas?
then the question is, how do you have it? So some people it's really good to have as a tea. For some people, they need it in a little alcohol fermented liquid called an arishtam, which is really good for them because if they have a little extra fat in their body, the alcohol cuts through with its astringents and brings that herb into, past the fat and into the person. For some people, it's going to be in a ghee because the ghee is going to carry that herb into the fat. So there are different ways of getting those oils in, but as a default, yes, tea works, and also steam inhalation. Last year we had a whole crisis with oxygen concentrators and people with COVID having, low immunity and then not being able to breathe suddenly and then well, why didn't more people in India die? India didn't afford all those oxygen concentrators. It's that the people in the cities died because they're all trying to be modern, urban, westernized. But in the countryside, in the small towns like Benares, people know that if you just get hot water and you boil it, that steam will penetrate into the nose and allow breathing to be easier. And if you just put some holy basil or some menthol, you can use essential oil of menthol, spearmint, peppermint. You can put in a couple of different herbs. Like one is a licorice stick, like the bark of the plant licorice. And those smelled up right through the steam that are coming up and penetrating into your mouth and nose as you breathe when you're having difficulty breathing. The first sign of difficulty breathing, I would notice that they would use steam and it would get alleviated. Are they out of the woods? No, they need to do it several times a day until they take the medicines that will actually help them get better. But that crisis level, that emergency medicine, when people couldn't get their oxygen masks, I tell them, boil water, put it in a thermos with the cap on it, and then every once in a while, open it up, inhale the steam, and have a towel over your head so you really get the steam inside of you. Even if you're in a car driving to the hospital, a lot of people died on their way to the hospital because they couldn't breathe. Have that steam inhalation. So the steam with the herbs in it was, a super way of intervening. Preventively, I told people, breathe, do pranayam. Every day, learn to do the breath of fire as well as the inhale, exhale, which is a balancing breath, right? It balances your two hemispheres of your brain. So these kind of preventives are there. And then having the tea, like you mentioned, an herbal tea that's appropriate to, if you have more phlegm, have the tea for that. If you have a gut problem, you have irritable bowel syndrome, a lot of your immune system is in your gut. So get your gut balanced. Have a tea that helps your food move down and out. Don't ever have constipation. If you don't poop every single day, you are disabling your immune system. All of these kind of practical
And
things.
several times a day.
Well, some will have several times a day, but it's really good to have it once or twice a day, and that's it. The body's actually made not to poop all the time because the human body needs to travel and it can't always stop for a bathroom break. So the body's designed physiologically that
Right.
way. If you need to poop many times a day, it means your gut is not aligned with the harmony of your physiology. And that's true for many people, right? 40% of people in New York have irritable bowel syndrome.
What? 40%?
Yeah, it's really high. I mean, that's what the statistics show, but who knows what's real, right? But I've met a lot of people
Well,
who have
that's still
irritable
high.
bowel.
I mean, no matter what, that's high, and I'm sure stress is probably a big cause of a lot of that, but,
Yes,
um
stress is. I mean, I can tell you that a lot of medical students, I would say it's more than half of medical students have irritable bowel syndrome. When I worked on Wall Street, a bunch of people had it, and I knew because if I'd go to the bathroom, it was terrible. Um, and not only noises but smells. And people take a long time in the bathroom, and I would notice that wow, I go to the bathroom if when I'm healthy, I go in, make my deposit, I'm done in like 35 seconds, and then I wash with water, and I'm done. But people that sit and they strain and they have constipation or they are cramping so they can't get up, that's not healthy. That is clogging up. It's kind of polluting the lower gut where a big portion of your immune system sits. And so you're not having access to an immune system. And over time, the immune system is it's fighting a battle in the lower gut, and then it's not available to other parts of your body when you do end up getting sick. So we actually did a study looking at people that got COVID that couldn't seem to recover. They had what's called long COVID or post-COVID syndrome. And all we did is we changed their food and got them to poop every day and balance out their gut with a series of food recommendations. And they improved. They got over their breathing problem. They got over their post-COVID, and their numbers rebalanced. And we thought that was a really interesting thing that food did it. But we were saying to the reviewers, it's not about the food. It's about cleaning out the lower gut and re-enabling the immune system. I hope this is understandable to people who are not technically oriented. But I think if you just learn a basic amount of physiology, it should make sense that if you work on that level and don't get caught up in the names of medicines that are coming and going, then you'll do a lot better. And if you're going to get vaccinated or boosted, then make sure your gut is in a very stable place before you go so that your immune system can actually do the right thing and not get clogged up from this, foreign injection that you're getting.
right. Wow. So if people want to find out more about you, or they want to contact you, or they want to follow you, how do they do that?
I do have a YouTube channel that's called Dinacharya Institute. I have a website, which is www.drbhaswati.com, which will be in the comments below. And on that website, you can get to my blog where I write about Ayurveda and practical hints. I have classes for those of you who want to attend either an introduction to Ayurveda class that I'll be doing in the spring of 2022. I usually do it in the spring every year, as well as more advanced classes if you already have some Ayurveda background. And the website leads you to a bunch of different videos and various places where you can learn more.